How do you find meaningful work? That is the question that I asked myself this past week, and I've been thinking about it as I've iterated upon my podcast. From where we are now, I'm no longer sitting down doing these podcasts, I'm standing up. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I have done a crazy audit on my podcast. I've realized that I have lower energy when I'm sitting down. And so now I'm standing up to host these podcasts. I actually just got off of a podcast interview with another guest, and I felt just so much more focused and energized to do it. So, yeah, standing up is huge. And the audit, right? It goes to show that this is genuinely something that I find meaningful because I went through the pain of rewatching my past episodes multiple times, taking notes on each individual part that I messed up, seeing things from a bigger picture, and figuring out, okay, I could have higher energy here. I could have worded that question a little bit better. I can iterate upon the intro and make it a little bit smoother. So these little nuances of the episodes that I wanted to improve upon. And so I did that, and now here we are. I'm standing up to record these episodes. I have the nice new backdrop. The lighting is amazing. Hopefully, the video quality is better. And my research and my immersion into the guests has been deeper, even though I'm working less. I'm not spending as much time curating the questions. I'm allowing the guests' aura to kind of marinate with my thoughts. And so I'm reading their content, I'm watching their their videos on YouTube, I'm listening to them, and I'm just trying to get a feel for who they are as a person so that I can create a vibe around the show. And that's another insight that I've realized with the podcast. It's not about doing a ton of questions, or it's not about making sure that you get through all the questions in a certain amount of time. It's not about having 17 camera angles. It really, when it boils down to it, it's about creating a vibe with the guest and just having an educational conversation together. I think that's fundamentally what it's all about. And that's what I'm that's my goal now. It's to just create vibe and create an atmosphere for the guests to feel comfortable, to share their thoughts, to share their expertise. And since last episode, we've pivoted our podcast more deeper into the health niche of for entrepreneurs, focusing specifically on the ideas of purpose, meaningful work, taking breaks, spending time to actually sit back, reflect, and think about what are the essential things that we need to do in our lives as entrepreneurs. You know, it's not all about working for 17 hours a day. It's about stepping back, thinking about what are the things I can cut out, what are the things that I actually need to do, what is actually moving the needle. And that's what I've done with my podcast, right? I've audited it. I figured out what are the things that aren't serving me and what are the things that are serving me. And there's three things that move the needle for me personally with this podcast, and it's hosting, so doing these episodes and doing interview episodes. And it's doing guest research and immersing myself into their lives and understanding who they are as a person so I can create that vibe. And then finally, it is simply recording the these things, right? So it's recording the documenting the journey part. It's rewatching the episodes and just iterating upon the podcast in my performance as a host, and just picking up on the nuances of how I could be even better. That is what I've kind of picked up on, and that's what I've found to be truly essential to this process. And as I've gone through and done that audit and reflected upon the purpose of the podcast, I've experienced a few times throughout this past week a little bit of doubt surrounding, what I want to do with this podcast, because the past few episodes have been underperforming comparatively to the previous few episodes, and it's giving me a little bit of doubt about, okay, is this really the right path? Am I doing something wrong? Like, how can I just be better at doing these episodes? And what am I doing wrong with like thumbnails on YouTube? Maybe the titles just need to be a little bit more clickbaity, and it's been kind of a struggle to realize that this is the part where most people quit. This is episode 20. One more episode and then we'll be in the top 1% of podcasters, because 90% quit after episode 3, and then of those, I think it's like only 10% make it to episode 21. So top 1% once we hit 21 episodes. So I can at least get to that point and then look back and realize, okay, I'm in the top 1%. I have poured my heart and soul into this podcast. I'm doing a video podcast. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of editing, it's a lot of time and effort to set this up, to post onto YouTube, to think about thumbnails, and to think about titles, and to edit. It's a lot, but it's worth it because this is genuinely enjoyable. I find it satisfying to be able to have an excuse to talk to amazing entrepreneurs and have my questions answered, to have new ways of seeing the world through the lens of not just Alex Hormozy or, Naval Ravikant, like these massively successful entrepreneurs, but from entrepreneurs that are just a few steps ahead of us, just a few steps ahead, and just getting their insights and putting it in a way, packaging it in a way that's like actionable. What are the things that I can do to get that outcome, or to be this way, or to have that behavior? And as I was going through and auditing my podcast, I realized that I was noting down certain aspects of my performance as a host, the questions I asked, and naturally, I was going through and nitpicking down and narrowing down the behaviors, like the things I actually need to do to be that certain way. And one particular thing that I remember is just not being as energetic. And so I asked myself, okay, what does it mean to be energetic as a host? And I realized it was having varied facial expressions. It's about exaggerating your hand gestures. It's about looking at the camera. It's about speaking in a way that is enthusiastic and with conviction, right? So there's behaviors and there's actual things you can do to be a certain way, to be energetic. And then downstream from energetic, there's more behaviors that you need to further define. And from just one characteristic of being energetic, you can then go even deeper into finding, okay, well, if I need to exaggerate my hand gestures, what does that even mean? That means like being wider with your hand gestures. It means doing them more often, varying them, right? Instead of just doing the same hand waves, you can do different hand gestures depending on the topic of the conversation, and just learning the balance between what is necessary to improve and what is unnecessary, because there's a lot of ways you can get overwhelmed by trying to constantly improve, making sure that everything is perfect, that you can start to feel like you're not making progress because you're trying to do so many things at one time. And so what I've realized is that each solo episode, focus on just one thing. And so this past interview episode, I focused more on telling my own story. So what does that look like from a behavioral perspective? It's listening to what the guest says and then mirroring the level of vulnerability that they evoke. So if they open up a little bit about their story, their origin story with like video games, or their experience with wanting to quit, and having fear of failure, then I can mirror that and simply open up about my story, and have these specific details in there as well, so that it's more personal, and so you the listener, get to hear more of my story instead of just the guest's story. Because the only insight that you get into my life is through these episodes, through the solo episodes. And so just injecting a little bit more of my life into the interview just adds more to the conversation. It makes it feel less like an interview and more like a conversation. So that's the one thing I focused on. And what I noticed was that throughout the interview, I was very cognizant of the things that I could still improve upon. It was just running through my head. I was like, oh, I could have said that better. Oh, I should have exaggerated my hand gestures. Oh, I should vary my the tone of voice. All these things were running through my head, and I think that's normal, but still don't let them distract you. Just focus on the mission, focus on the one thing that you're going to improve, and get really, really, really good at just telling more stories, telling your story, opening up about the details, and I think that's gonna be huge for me. And it gives me almost a pushback against the doubt, right? I'm going through the hard part of the podcast. This is the part where I need to personally improve and just keep iterating upon myself so that this podcast just gets better. And so that just gives me a reason to keep showing up. This is why I won't quit. It's because I'm here to, create something amazing. I'm here to build something that I will look back on in a few years and be proud of. That's why I'm doing these solo episodes so that I can come back as a T100 podcaster and re-listen to this episode and be like, that guy knew what he was talking about, or that guy had no idea what he was talking about. So yeah, it's gonna be one hell of a journey. Solo episode number 3. Hopefully this one was insightful. Definitely is pretty therapeutic to speak my mind.